Welcome to TVBS Meeting Room, where we tackle global issues with a view from Taiwan. I'm your host, Wenqi Yu. Today's guest needs no more introduction. Dr. Richard Bush was the chair of the American Institute in Taiwan from 1997 to 2002, and a familiar face to Taiwan. He served in the U.S. government for almost 2 decades, focused on East Asia. Recently, he co-authored a book with Ryan Haas and Bonnie Glaser, U.S.-Taiwan Relations. TVBS is publishing its Chinese version, 步步为营, and it's available in Taiwan beginning in December. Welcome, Dr. Bush.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's start with the Xi-Biden summit.
Okay.
Last week's APEC summit drew world attention, but really most people were paying attention to the much anticipated Xi-Biden bilateral summit. Well, both sides put on a very friendly agreement to collaborate on countering fentanyl production, understanding the risks of AI, and military-to-military communications. But those who have dealt with China from the U.S. government know China would not have agreed to a summit without making demands related to Taiwan. So should Taiwan be worried?
Taiwan people should certainly ask the question. But in this case, I do not think they should be worried, any more worried than they already are. Nothing has changed the situation as far as I'm concerned. The best evidence we have for what happened at the summit was the reported statements by President Biden and President Xi. There was not too much that was new in Xi Jinping's statement on the Taiwan Strait issue. He wanted arms sales to end. He stressed how important Taiwan was for the PRC. All that is routine rhetoric. The one new thing was that he said the United States should support peaceful unification. Now, it's not clear that he said that before. It's certainly not a theme of PRC declarations about Taiwan, but there is absolutely no chance that the United States, certainly under the Biden administration, is going to support China in its campaign for peaceful unification with Taiwan. First of all, we're quite clear-eyed about China's intentions and what they want about Taiwan. We're not going to be fooled. We understand that one country, two systems is very bad for Taiwan. We understand that the great majority of people in Taiwan are opposed to one country, two systems as a basis for unification. We have a great deal of respect for the wishes of people in Taiwan, which is a pretty good democratic system. We understand that one country, two systems would have profound consequences for Taiwan's democracy. Also, one can question his use of the word peaceful, because something important has been happening in PRC strategy towards Taiwan since Tsai Ing-wen became president in 2016. Beijing has moved to a strategy of what I call coercion without violence. That means exerting a lot of pressure, intimidation, marginalization, demonization, interference in Taiwan, and attacking the DPP administration and its leaders. The purpose of this is to basically break the spirit of the Taiwan people, to continue this campaign in a relentless way, and in the hopes that people in Taiwan will finally say, this struggle is not worth it. We should just settle for the best deal we can.
So on that point, I just want to drill down a little bit.
Sure.
Why do you think that Beijing thinks this kind of tactic would work? Just given even over the last 20 years almost, whenever Beijing issues warnings or threats to targeting Taiwanese people, it seems to have this kind of counterproductive effect from their point of view.
Well, that's a really good question. First, I would say that this is the way the CCP deals with people in China that it doesn't like. It squeezes them until they give up. So it's a natural Leninist kind of tactic. Second, this is a low-risk strategy. Going to war could create great damage for China, partly because the U.S. might intervene, and Beijing probably assumes that the United States would intervene. So the cost could be very great. It's not clear that Beijing would win. The Taiwan that they took possession of would be destroyed, basically. So why not try something else that is different from the approach of the Ma administration, but does put pressure on the government and people of Taiwan? There's no guarantee that it'll work, but it might. And there is some evidence that it is working.
Yeah. It's interesting. It sounds like on one hand, Beijing is trying to influence Taiwan's opinion and, from their point of view, obviously hoping to sort of cripple Taiwanese people's will of resistance. On the other hand, which, I do want to talk to you about because I believe that's the origin of the book, is trying to say, even though in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of speculation whether Xi Jinping or China is going to invade Taiwan in 2027. And, during the Biden-Xi summit, you also see Xi Jinping actually clarify that they have no plan to invade Taiwan in 2027. Can you just focus on that a little bit? Should we worry about 2027 or not?
I'd be happy to try. I wasn't in the room during the summit, so I don't know exactly what happened. But there is some information that Xi Jinping said that there are no plans to invade Taiwan. I think that's what he actually said. But he said it in answer to a question from President Biden. In the PRC government's statement about the meeting that goes into detail about what Xi Jinping said, it doesn't say that.
It did not include that, yes.
Yeah. So I think this is one of those cases where he may have been caught off guard, may have not been expecting this question, and so had to come up with an answer very quickly. I mean, it's not a bad answer. Just to say you have no plans doesn't mean you might
actually won't.
Plans.
Yeah.
But my understanding of the broader situation is that Chinese leaders for some time believe that they need to build up the power of the PLA, at least to deter Taiwan independence. And that if they do not have the ability to punish Taiwan militarily, then some Taiwan leaders might be tempted to move in the direction of de jure independence. Now, just because you have the capabilities that ultimately could be used to attack Taiwan, and that's where PRC is moving, that doesn't mean that they're going to be used. There's a difference between capabilities and intention.
Yeah, and I think that's the main debate in Washington, D.C. these days. Yeah. Yes.
And I think the smart scholars believe that what Xi Jinping has told the PLA is you get ready to fight, and then I'll tell you whether you fight or not. I will make the decision. I think if you study the messaging coming out of the administration over the last couple of months, you will see a lot more discipline and moderation in what we say about this. The situation was very confused, and I'm sure people in Taiwan were very confused and anxious about the messaging coming out of Washington. But I think it's better now.
Yeah. I mean, so let's say, maybe the deadline is not 2027, but it still doesn't mean that Beijing doesn't harbor the intention to invade or take over or unite Taiwan from their perspective, ultimately, right? Especially with the military means. And I think the question is always, it's not about whether they will do it, it's about really when. And, when Beijing would think that it is really ready to make the move. And so, how should Washington, D.C. really think about this, just given, there's so many different perspectives and honestly, a little bit of noise around this urgency. What in your expert opinion should be the right way of assessing the risk level?
Well, first, I think we need to clarify that for Beijing, the choice is not between going to war and appeasing a government in Taiwan that does not want to pursue unification. I think that Chinese leaders, if it is possible, would like to settle this, as they say, peacefully.
Peacefully.
And they've been very patient over the last 40 years. They have not been so patient on some other issues.
Yeah.
They have drawn red lines when it appeared to them that Taiwan was moving in a negative direction. They did try to work with President Ma Ying-jeou to advance in a gradual, cooperative way in the direction of closer and closer relations. I think they still understand the costs of going to war. And there may be a lack of confidence in the PLA's ability to win. So what I think they're worried about and what might trigger a war are actions from Taiwan that Beijing would perceive as closing the door on any future possibility of unification.
What would that look like?
I think it would look like a binding and authoritative action to change the legal identity of Taiwan and create a Republic of Taiwan, essentially Taiwan independence.
So can we also focus on that?
Sure.
And I think, there's a lot of writing and framing of Taiwan independence and what that really means. Some involve, the official declaration. Some would say, Taiwan's already an independent country. Regardless, the status quo in Taiwan right now, in some way, sort of fits the DPP's, the current ruling party's narrative that Taiwan is already an independent country. So I guess my question comes down to the status quo, because in the past, I believe status quo is the accepted status to describe the current Taiwan and Beijing relationship. And both sides seem to be okay with that. But increasingly, as you said, Beijing has been patient, but will Beijing continue to be as patient to accept status quo? Because it may imply the de facto permanent separation if this kind of status quo continues. So what do you think Beijing is really thinking? Will they continue to see status quo as an acceptable status for Taiwan?
Well, one problem is that different people have different definitions of the status quo. The United States says that we oppose any unilateral action by either side to change the status quo, and then we don't define what it means. We refuse to define what it means. The statement that the Republic of China or Taiwan is an independent sovereign state is a complicated one. There is a technical international law definition of that, which really means, I think, non-subordination of Taiwan to any other sovereign entity. It's a claim of sovereignty. Mm-hmm. It's not saying we are a separate state in the international system, but it serves a political purpose as well. Oh, I would note that I did a little bit of research about when this formulation was first used. And the earliest case I found goes back to October 1971, when Taiwan, or the Republic of China, had to leave the United Nations.
Yes. Yes.
And the person who said it was President Chiang Kai-shek.
Yes.
So if he's saying that, it means something different from, a de facto declaration of independence. What I think is most important about it is its political use. Yeah. And if you say Taiwan or the Republic of China is an independent sovereign state, we don't need to declare independence, that is a way of saying to the deep green faction of the DPP, we don't need to pursue your agenda. Your agenda is unnecessary. Now, whether the deep green faction believes that or not is another question. But it's useful. President Lee Teng-hui used that trick in his inaugural speech in 1996.
Yeah.
So this is a sort of a recurring theme in Taiwan's political discourse.
I think I want to come back. Thank you for that explanation, which is extremely important. But I do want to come back to the question of status quo.
Sure. Okay.
And because it is so connected to independence, I would say, Beijing pretty much frames anything that the DPP does as pro-independence.
Yes.
It could have been done by the KMT, but, Beijing may not have framed it that way. So in that case, is it really fair to, really frame the DPP or the current government's behavior as pro-independence, and what that really means for status quo? And will Beijing continue to be patient with the status quo if there is another DPP government for the next 4 years or even 8 years?
To work back, I think that Beijing will be willing to be patient with another DPP government. It probably will, or certainly will, continue the campaign of coercion that it has employed against the Tsai administration to continue to undermine the confidence of Taiwan people in the future. It may tighten up that coercion a little bit. I have no idea what their plans are. But as I said before, the risks are low, and the whole thing may work. And there is some evidence that it is working. Now, the action by a DPP government that I think would signal to Beijing that the status quo is changing is a step that suggested that it was the intention of that government to change Taiwan's legal identity. And there were a couple of times that Chen Shui-bian, when he was president, did exactly that.
Right. But Chen's time is also different from Tsai's time, and maybe different again for Lai's time, because the entire global environment is different. The public opinion in Taiwan is also different today.
Yeah.
And I think, let's actually talk about public opinion in Taiwan, because, the presidential election is coming up in January, compared to even 8 years ago when Tsai won the election. It seems that Taiwan's public opinion has moved even further away from this idea that Taiwanese people actually want to be governed by Beijing or under the same regime in any shape or form. And as we see, Pan Blue has not been able to have a coalition as of today, and the registration deadline is Friday. And then the DPP just announced Bi-khim Hsiao, the former de facto ambassador to DC, as the vice presidential candidate. What do you think is going to happen on January 13th, and what does that mean for Taiwan's future?
Well, it's a good question. I have made bad mistakes trying to predict the outcome of elections, including the Trump-Clinton election. But clearly, everybody understands in Taiwan that what happens between the non-green political parties and actors is very, very important in the outcome. We saw in the year 2000 when the blue forces were divided and Chen Shui-bian won with less than 40% of the vote. So the pressure to work out some sort of mutually acceptable arrangement is there. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that the United States is ready for anything. We cannot predict ourselves who's going to win the election, and so we have to be ready to deal with any new government, and we certainly don't want to alienate one political party by favoring another political party when the first political party wins. So I do hope that Taiwan gets a government that is smart, coherent, and effective. That's what the people deserve.
And would you say Tsai's government has been smart, coherent, and as you described?
Well, I think both the Ma Ying-jeou government and the Tsai government, in different ways, have been that way. I think that, first of all, President Tsai has not taken the kind of risks that Chen Shui-bian took. Her mantra is don't bow to pressure, but don't provoke the PRC, even though we have American support. That's a very good guideline. And it seems that maybe William Lai will follow the same guideline. I think one thing that has happened is that Taiwan political leaders have accommodated to the status quo preferences of the population, who are very important in all of this, right?
Yes.
And a majority of the public appears to understand that changing Taiwan's legal identity by creating a Republic of Taiwan would lead to war. And they don't want war. They also understand that for the United States, how the war begins is very important in what we do. And for Taiwan to start the war through this political action would probably mean that Taiwan was on its own.
Yeah. Well, I think, the Taiwan issue, I mean, you've been working on it for your entire career. And, more recently, it's become more important because of the economic aspect of it. So, more than military deterrence, but economic deterrence has become an important tool for U.S. policy toward China and thus Taiwan. So that's why you see the CHIPS Act, export control policies are, kind of touted as a new industrial policy that prioritizes U.S. economic security. And these policies have clear implications for Taiwan. And some in Taiwan have questioned whether Taiwan is actually sacrificing its leadership in the semiconductor sector for the U.S. interests. Specifically, for example, TSMC onshoring, Arizona investing in new fabs, etc. What is your view of those movements?
Well, first of all, in this particular topic, we need to distinguish between the United States and Donald Trump. Donald Trump basically tried to extort payments from the United States, in this case, in the form of a chip foundry in Arizona. My larger answer to your question, though, is that I think that Taiwan has so firmly established its dominance in this sector and has been very smart about keeping it in Taiwan and to protecting its intellectual property, to creating clusters of cooperation among different Taiwan companies, and to embedding Taiwan in larger global supply chains that I'm not sure we're smart enough or have the resources to significantly undermine that. And I think that one could say that for a company like TSMC, it makes sense to diversify a little bit. In countries where the business environment is good, where legal protections are good, where intellectual property protections are good, and where it gets chip production closer to the customers of the ultimate product. That's a business decision, and TSMC has made some really good business decisions over the years. So one can have confidence that they'll do the right thing. It was probably a bad idea for the United States to give up its lead in the production of semiconductors, but we did. So now we have to live with that. We can't get it back.
You do not believe the U.S. can get the capabilities back?
We may be able to recreate or create capabilities in certain specific sectors of the larger semiconductor sector. We do a lot better by cooperating with TSMC and other Taiwan companies. But I actually think that there are other things that the United States would best be advised to invest our resources in, rather than trying to compete with TSMC and the other companies in Hsinchu and other places.
Interesting view. Thank you for that, which is very important. Well, the last part we really wanted to talk about is Taiwan's connection to the other fronts of conflicts in the world. So, just a few weeks ago, the Hamas-Israel war broke out. On top of that, we have a Ukraine-Russia war. And so there's a growing voice in the U.S. calling for actually more focused defense support for Taiwan. just in case there may be a third battlefield, that the U.S. may be too stretched. Some even wanted to reduce support for Ukraine. And what is your view of this? Should Taiwan be viewed as part of the broader support for Ukraine, or this is more of an either-or scenario?
I don't think it's an either-or scenario. Certainly, the Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas conflict strain the United States to some extent, even though we're not in the battle, and that we are providing support of various kinds.
The arsenals as well. I mean, that's a big part. Yeah.
Arsenal, intelligence, organizing allies and partners. And that all takes time. And in decision-making in the U.S. government, the most basic or the most important decisions have to be decided by the same group of top people. So you may be sort of making decisions concerning Ukraine in the morning and then Israel Hamas in the afternoon, and coming back to Ukraine in the evening. It's very stressful. But
there's some worry. There's a real worry in Taiwan that somehow Taiwan would be deprioritized, since there's just too many fires to put out for the U.S. right now.
I think that the Taiwan situation is different from these two conflicts, in part because of Beijing's strategy towards Taiwan.
Yeah.
People in Taiwan think it's either war or no war. But what's going on is something in between. It's coercion without violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already talked about it. I don't need to repeat too much. But if what Beijing is doing is coercion to undermine public confidence, then Taiwan has time.
Mm-hmm.
The United States has time to build up Taiwan's resources in case Beijing ever decides that they do have to go to war. Taiwan has control over destiny by approaching cross-strait relations in a mature and cautious and non-provocative way. I think that although the Taiwan matter is very complicated, although it does require attention from at least some people in the U.S. government, it's a different order of what is going on with the daily problems of Ukraine and Israel Hamas.
So last question, is time on Taiwan's side or on Beijing's side?
Well, I used to say that time's on Taiwan's side. It really depends on which aspect of the problem you're looking at. If you're looking solely at the military side, you would have to say that given the fact that Beijing has built up its military capabilities so quickly and so comprehensively, and Taiwan has been slow to build up its own, that maybe time is on Beijing's side. But that's to use a purely military logic. If you look at the political dimension of this conflict, this dispute, you would have to say that, in a way, Beijing is falling behind. And that its approach to one country, two systems, which it seems to be unable to change or abandon or adapt, has less and less of a market in Taiwan. And its treatment of Hong Kong, which was under the one country, two systems formula, is just further strong evidence of why Taiwan people should be opposed to it.
Well, it clearly needs a new framework and almost like a marketing strategy as well.
Yes. Taiwan people are pretty smart, though, in figuring out what the game is.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on is that Xi Jinping really prioritizes political control. And that was really what was going on in Hong Kong. So I think the sort of new framework would emphasize control as well. So that's not going to be acceptable. So time, in a way, is on Taiwan's side when it comes to the political side of this relationship. It has opportunities to improve its democracy, to use some of the nation's resources to build up its military power, not only in hardware, but also in software. It has time to solidify its relationship with the United States and with other friendly countries. It has time, in spite of the PRC campaign of coercion, to strengthen solidarity among the people of Taiwan, so that they do not give up hope and play into Beijing's hands.
Well, thank you. It's good to hear that time is still on Taiwan's side. So more importantly, I wanted to thank you for keeping Taiwan understood and well explained in Washington, D.C. over the years. And in a time like this, I think it's even more important. For those who are interested in the most authoritative views on U.S.-Taiwan relations, the Chinese name Bubu Weiying, is a must read. So thank you, Richard, for joining us today. Take care.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And thanks for publishing the Chinese edition of the book.
Thank you.